Good afternoon. Back to Energy 101, and today we're going to talk about world oil price. There's a lot of discussion in the press and the media about oil price, particularly when gasoline in the U.S. has gone to $4 this fall. Of course, I'm recording this before the actual offering of the course starting in January. But oil, when gasoline hit about $4 a barrel, and then the election also at the same time, people started talking about we need to do something to bring the price of oil down and gasoline down. I want to make the point today and show the data and the information as to why the U.S. doesn't have its own oil market that prices, and we determine the price of our oil. The reason we don't is because we don't produce all our oil that we need. And there's a world price that everybody the world over pays essentially the same price. Europe pays the same price for oil landed in their port as Japan, the same as the U.S., the same as Australia. So it's a world oil price. Now, you kind of get misled on that, particularly if you travel to Europe and you're paying $8 a gallon for gasoline or diesel fuel, and over here you're paying $4. You say, well, oil's more expensive over there. Oil actually is the same. They pay the same for oil in France, Germany, Europe in general as we pay. The difference is taxes. They have about $4 a gallon taxes on their gasoline and diesel. So that is the reason their gasoline costs so much more. It's an energy policy issue with them. They have very little oil for their transportation system. They import essentially all of it. So trying to reduce the consumption of it, like we try to reduce the consumption of cigarettes, we put a lot of tax on it. It causes the more efficient cars to be built and purchased, but the actual oil price we're going to see worldwide is essentially the same. It's what we call a fungible commodity. Fungible just means that it's a commodity that it's oil is oil is oil, which didn't quite true. There are some varieties. There's Brent and there's crude, but there's light oil. There's different grades, but essentially they all are priced very similar. It's a fungible commodity like steel, and it's traded and shipped worldwide throughout the world. And the reason the price is set by world market and not by the local market is because the shipping cost is small relative to the cost of the product. It costs $2 to $5 to ship a barrel of oil across the ocean. And that's small compared to the $100 that you're paying for the actual product. So because the shipping cost is low compared to the cost of the product, then that means that everybody pays about the same, because it really is a free marketplace the world over. And even though there might not be a free marketplace within a country itself for many things in the oil trade worldwide, it is a free marketplace. Here's just a map to give you an idea of where oil flows and where it's shipped. If we look, you see there's a lot of arrows going into the U.S. Here's the U.S. over here, and you notice all the arrows coming in there. You notice there's arrow coming from Venezuela. We purchase a significant amount of oil from Venezuela. We purchase a significant amount of oil from Mexico, and this one is the arrow representing oil coming into Canada, from Canada. So, and then what's the origin of them over here? Well, here's Nigeria. Nigeria is shipping a lot of oil. You notice this component is coming to the U.S. We get a significant amount of oil from them. We get it from the Middle East over here, and which is all bundled together up here in Saudi Arabia. All these arrows come in and to the U.S. They also ship, the Middle East also ships oil to China over here. China is, since about 10, 15 years ago. China is consuming more oil than they are producing by a significant margin, and therefore they have to import a significant amount of oil, as we do. So Japan has very little oil of their own that they can produce, essentially none, and they have to import almost essentially all of the oil and gas that they get. So it kind of gives you an idea of how much of the oil is traded and shipped around the world. There are actually, in some cases, oil is produced and put on a large tanker and starts across the ocean before it is actually sold, because they know that there will be a need for it, and they just sell it to the highest bidder while it's on the high seas. So it's an amazing world commodity. I wanted to point out that there's one area that is great security concern to the U.S. and to the rest of the world also, not just the U.S., and that is a choke point. There are several choke points, but the major one where oil has to go through for the rest of the world to get its oil, and the major one is the Strait of Hormuz. And there tankers move through that strait, and there's a narrow strait. It's a couple miles wide, and therefore it could be blockaded with very little effort compared to trying to blockade what's coming across the Atlantic Ocean, for instance. But there's about 17 million barrels per day that is shipped through that strait, and that strait is bordered and is basically controlled by Iran, is the one that dominates it, and United Arab Immigrants has also got a small coast on it. But it's the strait is dominantly controlled by and dominated by Iran. That concerns a lot of the security people. This 17, by the way, is not an insignificant number compared to the world's oil supply. That's 17. I just put the fact that world oil supply and demand is about 75 million barrels per day. There again, I'm talking about oil. When I mean oil, it does not include the natural gas liquids and other products. That's classified, when you add it to oil, as petroleum. You have to watch that, and it's misused. Oil is attached to a lot of numbers that you see that it actually says oil when it's really, the number is total petroleum, which is a confusing factor. But that strait is right over here, the Strait of Hormuz. And right here, well, if I get it here, right here about in the middle of the screen, and right here, and it's only about 2 miles wide where all the tankers come through there, and about 1/3 of all the oil that is consumed and produced in the world comes through that strait. It's a frightening number, about 30% actually. It comes through 25–30% of the oil that is used and produced in the entire world is shipped by tanker right through that strait. And that's a security concern to a lot of people. Just want to point that out, that it is a world commodity and a fungible commodity, but that leads to having to have free shipment of it around the world. So how is the world oil price determined, and what affects it? Well, OPEC produces about 30 million barrels of oil a day. I've already said that the total world oil production and consumption is about 75, so they produce 30 million barrels per day. And they adjust their production. OPEC adjusts their oil production to meet certain targets. And their target now is to adjust their oil production to control the price of oil between $90 and $100 a barrel. it's very difficult to control it exactly because demand goes up and demand drops off for various reasons. And it takes them a while to respond. Once they decide to increase it, it really takes on the order of 6 months for the increased production to get to market, or the decreased production to start taking away the glut on the market. So there's a delay time there, and by the time you get the impact of their increased or decreased production gets to the marketplace, the demand has already changed on the positive side or negative side. But this is a plot that demonstrates how they basically influence the market. The blue bars down here is the OPEC production target, and it's the million barrels per day change from a previous year. This bar is how much the production changed for that month compared to a year ago that same time. So they increased this was an increase in production, but this was a decrease in production. The red line shows the price of oil, the worldwide price of oil. By the way, WTI, couldn't think of it a while ago. West Texas crude is the other major crude oil that's traded on the market, and Brent being the other one. But you notice that the price of oil, this is the percent change. This price over here scale shows the percent change on a year-to-year basis. So this side shows with the blue bars, shows the million barrels per day of the production targets that OPEC has set and generally abide by. And this shows the percent change in price. Well, you notice when they reduced out here in early 2000, reduced the quota on how much oil they would produce, the price was low and it started up. And when it started up, it got up to where there was as much as a 50% change from the previous year in price. And so they started increasing then the quota and increasing the oil production by as much as 3.5 million barrels of oil per day compared to the previous year. And then it was fairly stable, and then price started going up again right in here, and they increased the production in order to try to bring it back down again. And so you see a tremendous correlation. Here's another one. Prices got low. They don't want prices to get too low. It affects their cash flow, and so they decreased the amount of oil compared to the previous year by about 4 million barrels per day down in here, and drove the price back up. So there's concrete data here that shows that OPEC does carry a great influence and have a dominant influence over world markets, because it's a very, very price inelastic situation that you don't have to change supply very much in order to change price dramatically, because people have to, for instance, drive to work. So when price goes up from $3 to $4, they can't use less, and they can cut down a few things, but they got to commute to work, which is probably their biggest gasoline consumption. So it just shows that the world oil price and the market is greatly influenced by OPEC. And just to give you an example of this week that I'm recording this, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, 12th December, and OPEC held their meeting in Vienna, which they normally meet in to set these targets. And they don't make it a secret, as is shown here. It came out in the press. OPEC on Wednesday maintained its oil production ceiling of 30 million barrels a day and extended the tenure of its Secretary General for a year in the face of a forecast decline in demand for the group's oil. So the point is that they do set these quotas, and they do have meaning. Now, the discipline of the member countries is varied with how they meet these, abide by these quotas. But as we've already pointed out, or I think I did, the members produce about 35% of the world's oil, and the OPEC members are Saudi Arabia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Nigeria, Iraq, Angola, Venezuela, Algeria, and Qatar. But the thing we have to realize is they're not all created equal, so to speak, and have equal weight. Saudi Arabia dominates the OPEC production. Why do I say that? Because of this data right here. You see that this is the percent of total OPEC production produced by each of the countries. OPEC members' production in 2011. Here, Saudi Arabia produces over 30% of the total OPEC members' oil production. Number 2 is Iran, that is less than 10%. United Arab Emirates is about the same, about 10%. Kuwait, Nigeria, Iraq, Angola, Venezuela, Algeria, and Qatar, and the others, that's not all of them, there are about 3, I think, others, but they are less than 5%. But the point is that Saudi Arabia is the big dog on the block. And many times it is noted that by people that follow this very closely that Saudi Arabia is the one that actually enforces for themselves with their oil production the quota. And the rest of the countries don't make much adjustments in their oil production and supply. They pretty well maintain it at their maximum production rate. But it's left up to Saudi Arabia, which they can easily do with having over 30% of the production. That is, they take on the responsibility of abiding by seeing that the total oil production is in line with the quota. So in conclusion, the U.S. oil price is set by world supply and demand. Increasing U.S. oil production does not have a significant effect on world price or U.S. price. In other words, we can increase and are increasing somewhat our oil production, but it has a very small influence on the world market because we produce a small, and the increase is a very small percentage of the world market. And as a matter of fact, if it did start having an effect, Saudi Arabia and OPEC members would decrease their supply and keep the price where they want it. But basically, and I have down here OPEC, but in parentheses, Saudi Arabia, who is the big dog on the OPEC block, controls the oil price by adjusting production. One note that I wanted to make, that this is totally different than natural gas. Natural gas price is not set by world markets, and the reason it's not is because natural gas is a gaseous form, it's low density, and it is shipped by pipelines. Well, you don't ship oil across the Atlantic or the Pacific in a pipeline. And so the cost to ship natural gas is very high compared to the cost of the product. It essentially doubles at least the cost of the product when you add shipping. And the reason it's so expensive to ship is you can't ship it as a gas. It just takes up too much volume. And you have to cool it to minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit to liquefy it. And then you have to put it on a special LNG tanker that has to be specially built and maintained and in order to ship it. And that is an expensive proposition. So I just want to make a note that oil markets are different than natural gas markets. Natural gas markets are set in the North America, Canada, U.S., and Mexico because we do have pipelines that ship natural gas between these countries overland in North America. Thank you.